Hey guys, it's Mo and welcome to my first wrap up for the year of 2021. I'm going to be talking about all the books that I read or attempted to read in the month of January. So I had a pretty good reading month as far as like the quantity of books. The ratings could have been better, but it was pretty good I think too. I wanted to record this video a while back, but I just have had no motivation or time to sit down and talk about this stack of books that you see behind me right here. I will just like go ahead and get straight into them, I guess. So there's 14 books that I wanted to talk to you guys about. 2 of them were DNFs, so I completed a whole total of 12 books for the month of January. I feel like I might as well talk about them in the order of how I rated them, so I'm gonna need to sort those out first. Okay, so let's talk about the books like I mentioned first that I completed or started but didn't complete. So the first one we have is The Parisian by Isabella Hamad. I actually started this book back in 2020. I don't even remember the specific month now. I started this book back in September, so I am officially DNFing this book. I really tried to push through it, so I got the audiobook from, I think I got it from like Audible or something. And I made it very far into this book and it took me so long to even get just like almost 200 pages in. And if I wanted to complete the audiobook, it was probably gonna take me like another 7-ish hours. And I didn't want to devote more time to a book that I feel like, I don't know, I feel like if I had pushed myself and finished it, I probably would have given it 3 stars just for the fact that I had finished it. But it's really disappointing because I really wanted to enjoy this book. In this book, we're following a Palestinian student, and this is set during the First World War. And he is going to school in Paris specifically, and it's him and his journey like through school, dealing with different things and prejudices because of where he's from. He also has a little bit of like a love thing going on, and all together like it sounded so much like something I would enjoy reading, but I don't know, just I think it has to do with the writing or something. It's just was taking me so long to get through. I really tried my hardest to get into this book, but it just was not a fit for me. I found myself bored, my mind was wandering, I just wasn't very interested in the story itself, so unfortunately this one was a DNF for me. But I will be listing it on my Depop soon, so if you want to pick this up, it'll be on there. Then the other book that I didn't finish last month, I don't have an actual physical copy on me, which I'm glad I didn't spend my money on it, and it was The Silence by Dawn DeLillo. Now, this is a book in translation. The translator is Frederica Astuto. I checked this one out as an audiobook from my library, and I'm really glad that I did. It was super short. I believe it was like 4 hours, so it only would have taken me 2 hours because I usually listen to audiobooks on 2x speed. Even then, I still couldn't force myself to finish it. I think I got about halfway into it and I just knew like I didn't understand what was going on. It just was completely going over my head. I didn't get it. So this book, I guess, was finished just weeks before the whole COVID-19 thing started. And we're following 5 people who are gathered together in a Manhattan apartment in the midst of a catastrophic event. And it's Super Bowl Sunday in the year 2022. We're following like the conversations of these different people, and for me, I just found it very boring. I didn't really get what was going on or what the author was trying to do, and I just didn't feel like if I had finished the book, I would have been any more satisfied anyway. And it has pretty bad ratings on Goodreads too, so I feel like that one was one where it wasn't just me, whereas I feel like The Parisian, I can definitely see why some people would like it. It just wasn't for me. This one, I just completely didn't see anything good about this book at all, which makes me a little bit nervous because I do have one other book by this author called White Noise that I haven't gotten to yet. Actually, randomly have 2 copies of that one, so I'm hoping that I really like that other book better, because if not, then I just think that this is probably just an author that's not for me. So I didn't have any 1 or 2 star books for last month. I think I did end up rating The Parisian 2 stars on Goodreads because I had made it so far into it, and I just felt like I needed to rate it and so that I could have my rating out there. So as far as 3-star books, I had 4 of those. So let's go into, they're actually all YA books now that I'm looking at it. So the first one we have is Dealing in Dreams by Lilium Rivera. This book I was reading as part of the Buzzwordathon for the month of January. The prompt was to read a book with the word dream in the title, so I went with this one. This one is like a young adult dystopia novel, and I found it entertaining enough to read. Like, I gave it 3 stars and it was interesting, but overall it doesn't leave me with like a super strong impression. Like I'm having a little bit of a hard time even remembering some of the details now because it's been so long since I read this one. I listened to this one on audiobook, and we're following our main character. Her name was Nala, and she's the leader of this all-girl crew in a place called Mega City, and there's all these crews and they battle. They're all female crews and they battle together for like street cred and territory and stuff, and they all hope to make it into the Mega Towers, which is like supposed to be like this nice life because everybody who's like outside of this towers and is a regular working person doesn't really have much going for them as far as like being in poverty and having to be involved with like the gangs and everything. Nala has the opportunity to possibly move into the Mega Towers with her and her crew, but she has to do something for the founder of the city. She has to find the Ashe Riders, who are this like other group that used to be part of the city, but they left and people like don't even know if they really exist anymore or not. And so she has to go on this journey with her and the other girls in her group that's kind of very dangerous so that they can hopefully potentially make a better life for themselves. So yeah, I like this book. It was okay. I feel like I'm finding that with young adult books, I'm a little bit more pickier now as I get a bit older. So I find I'm kind of picking up less and less of them, which is why I think a lot of the times they mostly just give them 3 stars. So the same can be said for the next 2 books. So I also listened to this one on audiobook. It's Charming as a Verb by Ben Phillip. Or Philippe, I hope I'm saying that right. In this book, we're following our main character, Henry, and he's very popular at this like private upper class school that he goes to in Manhattan. And he's a first generation Haitian student. He lives with his family in Manhattan, and he also has this business where he just walks dogs for the other people. Like, he doesn't come from a lot of money, unlike a lot of his schoolmates. His dream is to get into his dream school, and that's Columbia University. So he meets this other girl. She's also on the debate team with him. Her name was Corinne, and they end up getting roped into this interesting situation where she is blackmailing him. I don't want to give away too much of the stuff that goes on, but this is like a contemporary young adult romance book, so you can figure something is going to happen between the 2 of them. There were some parts that I read in here where it was definitely giving me like a lot of secondhand cringe moments. I won't say and like spoil them, but I feel like that was something that kept the book from being rated a higher rating for me, because I just like had so much secondhand embarrassment from things that the characters were saying and doing. But I did really enjoy the writing, so I would be open to reading other books written by this author too. And then lastly, for my 3-star reads, we have Malcom and Me by Robin Farmer. This one is kind of in between middle grade and young adult, I feel like. We're following our main character, and her name was Roberta, and she's 13 years old. She's a young black student. She is going to this Catholic school in the 70s, and she wants to, well, she's really into poetry herself, and she's having to deal with a lot of racism and prejudice, mainly from the teachers at the school that she's going to, but also from some of her classmates as well. It's called Malcom and Me because she also has this relationship with Malcolm X, and she's like discovering his autobiography and reading it and trying to figure out like what that means for her and processing how some of his beliefs and things apply into her own life. I feel like this book is definitely written for a younger audience, but the voice of Roberta herself read, obviously like she has some immature things, she's 13, but I feel like she almost read a little bit older than her age, just like her thinking process and stuff. But I mean, I don't know, I don't remember being 13 that well, so maybe it's accurate. Overall, I think that this book was very well written. The dynamics between the things that are going on at home and with her sibling were very interesting to read about, and I enjoyed this book. I felt like it took me a while though to get through it, and I'm not sure exactly why. Because it's not really that long of a book itself, but yeah, this just took me a long time. I felt like I couldn't read more than like 30-ish or more pages. I just felt like it was moving a little bit slow for the genre, but altogether, like, this is a book that I would recommend for people who are in this age category. Lastly, we have one more 3-star book I forgot, but it's also, I'm gonna have to talk about the other book first. It's a 4-star because it's part of a series. So I was sent these 2 books called Flyy Girls. Lux, the New Girl, is the first one in the series, and the second one is called Flyy Girls, Micah, the Good Girl. I ended up giving the first one 4 stars, and I gave the second one 3 stars. So I'll talk about the first one first, I guess. These are super short books, so I was able to get the audiobooks from my library, and I listened to both of them in one night while I was cooking dinner, and each of them follows a different girl. So It takes place at this high school in Harlem, and there's 4 girls and they call themselves the Flyy girls, and they're friends. In each of the books there's going to be 4 in total. I believe the last 2 come out later on in this year, and each one follows a different story of one of the girls that's in the group. I preferred the first one better. The second one was good, but it wasn't bad, but I just did like the storyline overall in the first book. So in the first one, it starts out, we're following Lux Lawson, and she ends up being kicked out of her school for fighting because of bullying and stuff, and she ends up going to this new school where she meets the Flyy girls, and she's really into art and stuff. That's one thing that I really enjoyed about this series, is the school that they all go to is an art school, so each of them kind of has their own like creative thing that they're into. So Lux is sent to the school because she's been kicked out of every school that her parents have sent her so far. If she gets kicked out one more time, then they're going to send her to military school. So she decides that she wants to become friends with these girls because she thinks that they will be a good influence and the kind of friends that her parents would want her to have, so that she can stay out of trouble, keep her head down, and just get through the rest of high school. But in this process, she kind of keeps some things to herself, and she isn't completely honest with the people that are in her life, and we see that play out and everything. So these are very short, so I can't really say too much or else I'll be giving away too much of what happens in the books. But then we have the second one, which I gave 3 stars to, and that was Micah the Good Girl. In this one we're following Micah. Her thing is that she likes to paint, and her kind of backstory is that her parents are both heavily involved in the church that they go to, and she's having to balance like the religious expectations that her parents put on her with kind of just figuring out her own faith herself and what that means for her. She has a boyfriend at the same time, and that is also something that brings conflict and having to figure things out inside for herself and how far she wants to go and what she believes. So yeah, this one was good too. I don't know, I feel like I connected with Lux, who is the main girl in the first one, more so than Micah, but I think they were both very good. This one would probably be more like a 3.5 star rating for me. Now we're still in the 4-star books. So the first book I actually finished for this year was one that I had been putting off all of last year, and that is Dune by Frank Herbert. I knew this book was going to take me a while, so I specifically set aside like the whole first week of the year, and that this was going to be the only book that I was reading during that time. So the beginning of January I was still on unemployment for my job because we were still on lockdown here in California, so I had plenty of extra time to be reading a longer book. So I decided that I would feel very, I don't know, like accomplished if I were to finish like a giant book at the very beginning of the year, and that was a good decision for me to make. This book took a while to get through. It was about 500 pages, a little over 500 pages. And I feel like I've talked about this book so many times on this channel, so I'm glad to finally have finished it. Like I said, I gave it 4 stars. I enjoyed it. I read, you know, somewhere between like 50 to 100 pages a day, and I was able to complete it in about a week. I think one thing that helped me to keep on track and get through this book in a week was I listened to the audiobook at the same time that I was reading it. Like I would physically be looking at the page and listening to the audiobook at the same time, because I don't know why, it's just, maybe it's because I'm not super used to reading a lot of science fiction books, but with all the different like names and world building and stuff, it really just helped me to keep my mind focused on the book itself instead of wandering and stuff. And I did enjoy some of the like different voices and stuff they had for the different characters. I'm definitely very excited for the movie that's going to be coming out later on this year. I know there's like this is like a remake of the other one they've made before, but I haven't seen either. I'm just looking forward to the new one personally. This is a very complex and world building heavy science fiction novel, so just go into it knowing that if you decide that you want to pick this book up. It's part of a series, and I think that I do want to continue the series, but I'm not like dying to continue it right away. It's not like really one of my priorities, but eventually, you know, might even be after I watch the movie, I would like to continue on with the series. I think there's like 4 or 5 books. I will say it took me probably about 100 pages before I really understood the book itself and I got more into it and was interested in finding out what happened. I feel like it's partially me because I don't really read a lot of books like this, but also reading other people's reviews and things on this book. Like, this is a book that a lot of people start and don't finish, so I'm kind of honestly proud of myself that I got through this book, because it wasn't exactly the easiest thing at the beginning just because there's so many different words and their own languages and different things going on to keep track of. But once you like get it, then you get it. It just takes a while to get there. Following the story of a young boy, his name's Paul Atreides, and he's part of this kind of like higher up in the this noble family, and he's heir to ruling an hospitable world where the only thing of value is the spice melange, which is this drug that's capable of everything from extending life to enhancing consciousness. At the beginning of the book, we're following Paul and his family, and they're moving to this planet, and it's very inhospitable, like I mentioned before, and they're leaving behind their home planet, which they really enjoyed, but I don't really want to get too much involved in explaining all the politics and stuff of that because it's explained more in the book itself. One thing I found funny when I was reading this book was I felt like there was a lot of parallels with, I'm not even a huge Star Wars fan. Like, I didn't grow up watching all the movies all the time. Like, I've only just started watching them recently. But I've seen so many things that in the back of my mind I was like, this is very similar to Star Wars. And when I was like doing some research and stuff after I finished the book, I found out that George Lucas was very much taking a lot of inspiration from this book itself. So then after I read that, I was like, that made a lot of sense to me because I just seen a lot of different parallels, and I read a whole like article. There's a whole article out there I read that like compared all the different things that were similar to it. I think I've talked about this book enough, but yeah, I really enjoyed this book. I love this edition specifically. It's from Barnes & Noble, if you're wondering where this edition is from. I think it's a very beautiful edition and one that I'm glad to have on my shelves. Next, we have The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry by Gabrielle Zevin, another 4-star read. This one is kind of like a contemporary light fiction book, and I really enjoy this book. Specifically, I was wanting to read this because I was wanting to read books about books, which is definitely like a subgenre that I'm always interested in picking up books from. And in this one, we're following A.J. Fikry. He owns this bookshop in this little like seaside town area. I think it was by the sea. He lives alone, and he has this valuable Edgar Allan Poe book collection. It's very, very valuable, and it ends up being stolen, and something mysteriously is left in his place a few days later, or mysteriously arrives in his life, and I'm not going to give away too much in case you guys haven't read this book yet. I feel like I'm honestly one of the last people that have read this book. I've heard a lot of people have read this and enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I finally got to it. There's definitely so many literary references to a lot of books. Some of them I've read, some of them I hadn't, but that was very enjoyable. It's set in a bookshop. The main characters, there's another main character who's in the book who is like a publicist or works for a publisher. So we're just getting a lot of bookish content in this book itself, and I just really enjoyed it. I don't want to give away too much because I went into this book not knowing anything, and I think that that was good because everything that happened I was able to see. Like, some little things were predictable, I would say, in the book, but overall, like, I enjoyed the writing. I found it very entertaining. It was a very like comfort read type of book, and it's something I could see myself reaching for again in the future. Next, we have These Ghosts Are Family by Maisie Card. This is the author's debut novel, and I think for a debut novel, this was so well done. I am definitely going to be picking up whatever else Maisie Card puts out in the future. For this book, we're following multiple generations, all part of this Jamaican family. Our main character, his name is Abel Paisley. He left Jamaica for England in the 70s, and he was working on a cargo ship with one of his best friends, who his friend's name was Stanford Solomon. So the friend ends up tragically dying, and Abel, who has a family and everything back in Jamaica, decides that he's going to leave everything behind. He's going to take on his friend's identity and leave everything in Jamaica behind and start a new life in America. And the story goes on from there. We're following yeah, like I said, the different generations following after. We're going a lot of back and forth in between the different timelines. There is a map at the beginning of the book, which was definitely very helpful because after a while I started to get a little bit confused as to how everybody was related of the characters in the story. If you read Homegoing by Yaa Gyasi, I feel like that's something kind of similar to this. Like, if you liked that book, I feel like you would like this one. But I do think that I prefer Homegoing more than this one. So yeah, I gave this one 4 stars, and I feel like the reason why I didn't give it full 5 stars was just some of the different storylines and perspectives that we're following, because there are multiple people from the different generations that we're following. There were just certain ones that I was more interested and invested in and cared about more than others. So kind of, it almost is like a short story collection. but with the fact that everybody's stories are interconnected. Next, we have One by One by Ruth Ware, and this is her most recent release. I have this really nice Waterstones edition, and this was exactly what I was looking for when I was in the mood to read it. So it was very like stormy and rainy here in California a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to read a book that was very much centered around that kind of feeling as well. So I definitely got what I was looking for as far as like a cold atmospheric book. So this is a mystery thriller book. We're following this group of coworkers who work for this company called Snoop, which is basically this app where you can in real time listen to what other people are listening to as far as like music wise, like celebrities or just your friends and family. They're all in this corporate retreat in winter in the Alps on a ski resort thing, and it's all of them and the two people who actually run and work at the resort. It's very like boutique, bougie, kind of very small thing. It's just their company that's staying there, and they're going to be skiing, spending the weekend there. But we know that something is kind of a little bit off between some of the people. Like one of the girls that's there that we're following the perspective of, she's like a former employee. We don't know what has gone on there, and we're following the perspectives of one of the workers at the resort itself. So there is this avalanche that happens, and they all are snowed into their resort cabin thing, and one by one people start disappearing, and they don't know what's going on or why this is happening. And I just think that it was a very fun, entertaining read. It was exactly, like I said, what I was looking for, what I was in the mood for. It's not the best mystery thriller I've ever read, but that hardly ever happens when I'm reading mystery thrillers. I hardly ever give them 5 stars. Then we have a book that I was sent an ARC of, and that is Bride of the Sea by Iman Quota. We are following a newlywed couple, and they themselves are both from Saudi Arabia, I believe it was, and they're living in Cleveland, and they're expecting their first child, but things are not going well with the marriage. It seems like it's heading towards divorce. And one day the wife, her name was Seda, and the child, they just disappear completely. Munir, who is the husband, he's gone back to Saudi Arabia and he can't get in contact with them. He has no idea. She's completely disappeared. She doesn't want to go back to Saudi Arabia and to take her daughter back there, so she decides to make a new identity for themselves, and we're following the kind of repercussions of that over the next decades, like what effect that has not just on her, but the daughter, on the husband himself as he's spending the next decades trying to be reunited with his daughter again, how this affects her parents and his parents, who are both back in Saudi Arabia with the husband. This was a good book, I feel like, especially for a debut novel. One of the things that held it back from me giving it a full 5 stars was I felt like there were a lot of abrupt jumps in time, like in the timeline and in the characters' viewpoints, that I feel like weren't always the most smoothly done and made the most sense. Like it would be a little bit jarring, and we'd have to catch up a little bit with the time jumps. So that was one thing that kind of held it back from being a full 5-star read for me, but I will definitely look out for other books by this author in the future. And then my last 4-star read, but probably my favorite one of all the 4-star reads of last month, was Concrete Rose by Angie Thomas, and I was able to receive this beautiful signed first edition from Barnes & Noble when I attended, they had like a live Zoom event the day after the book was released with Angie Thomas, and so it came, purchasing the ticket for that event came with the book itself, because I wasn't originally planning on buying the book right away because I knew I was going to listen to it on audiobook, but now I also have this very beautiful edition, so I'm not complaining. This book was one of my most anticipated books that I was just very much looking forward to that were coming out this year, and I gave this one about like 4.5 stars. It was like very, very close to being a 5-star read for me, where I feel like if I were to read it again, I might actually change my mind and bump it up to a 5-star read for me. If you're familiar with Angie Thomas's other book, The Hate You Give, we followed our main character Starla, and this one is set in the same neighborhood, but it's essentially a prequel. So we're following the story of Maverick, who is her father, Starla's father in that book, and him as a teenager, dealing with gang violence and dealing with teenage pregnancy. There's just definitely a lot of hard-hitting topics that are touched on in this book, and I very much feel like it was very well done, and I love Angie Thomas's writing. The audiobook was very nice to listen to. I liked the audiobook narrator. Everything was just easy to listen to, pay attention, and follow along. While this was very highly anticipated for me, I was just a little bit nervous because you never know when something is essentially like a sequel, even though this was technically like a prequel, you just never know if you're going to enjoy it as much as the other bookish content that it's related to. And I'm very glad that I feel like this book stands well enough even on its own. If you haven't read The Hate You Give, you could definitely go into this book and not be confused at all. It just works well as a standalone novel itself. It's very hard to read the story of this young boy who his own father is incarcerated himself, like his mom's working 2 jobs trying to provide for him, and him having to go see the decisions he's making, and the decisions he's making aren't the best decisions, but just seeing like the influences he's around and the experiences he has growing up. I just feel like this is definitely a very hard-hitting contemporary young adult book, and I'm so glad that I got to it in January and that I didn't put it off any longer. And then last but not least, we have my 1 5-star read for January, and that was The Return by Hisham Matar. It's Fathers, Sons, and the Land in Between. This one is a non-fiction book, and I know for sure I'm going to be rereading this book again in the future. I want to read everything that he has written. I know he has other novels that I believe are fiction, but this one is his non-fiction book. I think I came across this on one of like Barack Obama's recommended reading lists a few years ago that I had saved and then I eventually bought, and it's just been sitting on my shelves for so long, so I'm glad that I finally got into this one. This author and his family come from Libya, and this was around the time, set during the time of Gaddafi's regime. During this time, his father was taken to a secret prison and kidnapped and taken to the prison, and after that they have never had any trace from him. Never knew what was happened to him. It's a very sad and heartbreaking story to read from. Like, there were definitely moments in this book where it made me tear up just imagining having to go through this experience. It's just horrifying. He is such a great author in that this was just such an easy readable memoir to read from. You really feel what he was going through, him and his family. Like, this isn't really giving anything away. It said in the synopsis like it's 22 years later and they still have no idea what happened to him. So it's his journey of returning back home, trying to figure out what the true story is, what happened with his father. They figure, you know, he's probably dead but at this point, but you know, what events and things led up to that happening, they really have no closure on that. It can be incredibly frustrating to read, especially the responses from the political parties and stuff that were involved. While not surprising, it's still very hard to even think about going through an experience like this. The author was able to put it so well in his memoir. I just really enjoyed the writing of this, even though it is a very difficult read at times. I would highly recommend this book if you haven't heard of it before. Like I hadn't heard of it before. It's very short. It didn't take long to get through this book. It's just over 200 pages, but I feel like I flew through it pretty quickly. And I would just say, like, out of all the books that I read last month, this was the only one that I gave 5 stars to, that I would just like highly recommend to pretty much any reader. So those are all the books that I read in the month of January. I hope you guys enjoyed seeing my thoughts on all of these. Let me know if there's any books that you read in January that you would recommend to me that have stood out to you. And that's it. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!